Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. It's about time we do our 10-year update on the M14 EBR. So I'm going to kind of add some things on relative to my last video, which was a 5-year video. This one's a little bit overdue. I'm at more like 10 years and 6 months of ownership at this point. But we're going to talk about a lot of experiences, maybe some things I've learned along the way. I'm just like to add some talking points to the M14 discussion. And yeah, a lot of the stuff I'm going to talk about is mostly anecdotal. I'm not going to talk to too many training manuals or anything like that. It's just going to be stuff that's been working for me for the past decade. So this isn't gospel, so everything I say, take it with a grain of salt. I'm no authority on this whatsoever. It's just, like I said, what's worked for me. But before we hop into that, I'm going to talk about all the different parts that make up my particular build. So we're going to take this in chronological order from purchase date, and I think it's important to note the purchase date because it really speaks to the reliability of these parts. The vast majority of these parts have worked perfectly well after I purchased them, so I think it's cool to know how long some of these things have been on here. So we'll start with the oldest thing, the oldest purchase on my list here. I've got an outline on my laptop there, so I'm going to reference that. The oldest thing here is the Springfield Armory M1A National Match. I got that in June of 2014. And then a month later, in July of 2014, I got the Sage ALCS EBR chassis, and they've been together ever since. On the front here, shortly after, in July of 2015, I got the SEI, or the Smith Enterprises Coast Guard muzzle brake. Over here we have our Sage detachable cantilever sight base. I got the sight base in 2017 and I got the muzzle brake in July of 2015, if I didn't already say that. Down here, this trigger, which is a really great trigger, we'll talk about it more later. This is the Shooting Sight RPS EBR trigger. This was purchased, I lost my spot here. This was purchased in about 2017. I couldn't find the exact purchase date. I've got too many accounts online. And then up here in the front, we have hidden behind my sling is this CQD forward sling mount. It's just a little forward sling mount loop. Super affordable, super economical, and it really works well for a sling setup, especially on the EBR. When did I get that? I think I got that in 2019. Yes, 2019. If we fast forward to 2021 in December, I purchased the Night Force ATACR. This is a 7 to 35 power, first focal plane, MILRAD, and it has the Tremor 3 reticle. This has been a great upgrade. A little bit of overkill, but I got a great deal on it. Now, in the front here, the silvery part, this is usually where your crush washer goes for the EBR chassis. I wasn't a fan of that. I had a nice Redditor make me a custom washer down to the 1,000th of an inch. I just gave him my caliper measurements. He made it for me, shipped it to me for 20 bucks. I got a custom fit washer, which times perfectly to my rifle. So I was very happy with that. And then right here, this is a Ferro Concept Slingster. I've been running this for about 2 years and some change now, a little over 2 years. And it's been a great addition to the rifle. I already talked about the scope, but the way the scope is attached is with these Vortex scope rings, which I got in October of 2024. So these are 1-inch Vortex matched scope rings with a 34 millimeter diameter to go with the 34 millimeter ATACR that's on top. Another thing that you really can't see is inside of this rear scope cap. You might be able to see it a little bit. I'll zoom in on it later on in the video. I call it a dope cap. I have since gotten a little laser, and I basically put in my dope on the back of that cap. Again, we're going to talk about this more later in the video. We're just going through the parts right now. And then under here, can't see it, but this is where the, what is it? Sadlac National Match Op Rod Spring Guide is. It really makes the action a lot more slick, if you will, and it makes the spring tension a lot more constant and even. And then last two parts here is the Harris SBRMP bipod. It's a direct attached bipod to the Picatinny rail on the bottom of the EBR. And then the magazines, the last kind of part, I guess, if you will, that I'm going to talk about. Magazines I've used over the 10 years of ownership have been Springfield Armory, USGI, as well as Pro Mag magazines. Now, Pro Mag magazines required a little bit of modification, which we'll talk about later, but all of them have worked pretty well. So we will go ahead and we'll start with initial reflections for 10 years of ownership. So now we're going to reflect on 10 years of ownership, kind of start at the wave tops and then get more into detail as the video progresses. So, where do I think I've learned the most about this platform? What's the best source? I think the best source of information is the M14 forum. It is not like an authoritative source, but why it's helpful is because you have this huge collection of people who are very passionate about the rifle who have access to those sources. So you'll have people that have first-hand experience building rifles or first-hand experience using them overseas, or who just know where to find reliable sources to cite for torque specs or something like that. So I think the M14 forum is definitely where you want to go to learn things about your rifle, or really just to field questions. Another question is how has maintenance changed for this rifle? So I used to clean it pretty frequently. I used to take out the action from the chassis probably every couple months, which is a little bit too frequently. I've since stopped doing that, which is one way maintenance has changed. So now the main way I do maintenance is just by taking the piston out, cleaning that, taking the trigger group out, cleaning this area, and then of course cleaning the barrel. And I really think a couple things that would make an early M14 owner's life a lot easier is getting what we have here. So these are Sadlac piston drills. I just got these actually in the mail pretty recently. These will just make cleaning the carbon buildup out of your piston a lot easier. The drill is just designed particularly for the diameter of the holes inside the piston. So you just put it up there, drill it out, and then boom, your carbon's gone. I think also what helps with maintenance a lot is having your own fat wrench here. So this guy, super popular nowadays. Definitely pick one up if you don't already have it. I use it every time I'm doing gun maintenance. This thing is coming out. I've had that for I think about 7 years now, and it's still within 0.2 pounds of what you see on the display as far as torque settings are concerned. Especially with the EBR chassis, with the amount of screws that are on this thing, you really want to make sure your torque is dialed in, especially when considering that you're putting steel screws into an aluminum chassis. The chassis is aluminum, so it's softer than steel. You never want to over torque these things, and of course under torquing is just as bad. Lastly, also super ubiquitous is the bore snake. If you just want to do a quick clean and not really do a deep clean, just run a bore snake through it. I would definitely recommend that for anybody, but still do your bore cleaner, do your swabs if you have more time to sit down and actually clean the thing properly. But yeah, so now as far as taking the action out of the chassis, I typically only do that 18 to 24 months apart. And that's honestly just for a relube and an inspection to make sure there's no rust or no issues going on. You'll be happy to know there aren't any issues. There is no rust on this rifle. It's never been a problem. There's always a little bit of oil on the surface. You want to make sure to have that there just to make sure no rust pops up. And that recipe has worked for me. So customization. How has customization changed? I think a couple things I have tried to focus on are going to be shaving weight, optimizing accuracy, and improving handling. So shaving weight is kind of hilarious because we're talking about a very fat rifle here. But that's my motivation for trying to get rid of every possible little ounce of weight that I can. And it starts out here in the front. So a lot of folks who are getting the EBR, they might want to do a clone EBR of ones that were issued, earlier on in the GWAP. So if you want that, what that necessitates is a Knights Armament Corporation Picatinny to sling stud swivel adapter. as well as a Harris bipod that attaches to that adapter. So this already has a Picatinny rail on it. That's half the reason the rifle or the chassis system was made, to make it customizable. So that adapter is completely useless. If you're going to make a clone, yeah, you might want that. But if you're not making a clone, if you're just trying to get something to use for you to have fun with, then just get a Harris bipod that attaches directly to the bottom of the chassis. That's what I did. And I weighed it. It saved me 91 grams of weight, which isn't too much, but it's enough to notice, especially when all the weight is on the front end of the M14, which it is. So with the weight loss that happened down here, it gave me more room to put the ATACR on top, which made it just as heavy. So that's why I said it's kind of a laughable subject, but I just want you to kind of see how I think about this to try and optimize this rifle. Also on the weight savings and on the kind of on the accuracy side of the house is the scope rings. So I used to have 1.5 inch Vortex scope rings on here. That was way too high. I finally dialed in my height over bore, which is where the accuracy piece comes in. I dialed in my height over bore with this setup here. So again, this is the 7-35 ATACR with 1 inch rings on top of the Sage DCSB. So if you have those 3 parts, this will work for you. If you don't, you're gonna need to make other considerations. But what I'm trying to say is getting rid of that extra ½ inch of weight off of the scope rings saves you just a little bit. Again, it's really not noticeable to the shooter. Well, it is not noticeable, but if you're someone who's kind of nerding out on the numbers, then the numbers do change and it does get lighter. So that's one way I've made this a lot lighter. And then moving on from that, we're gonna talk a little bit more about accuracy. I kind of hinted at that with the height over bore, but a couple other things I want to get at are the scope. The high power that this scope brings to the table really lets you see exactly where your rounds are going. The center of the reticle is smaller than the diameter of the bullet, of a 30 caliber bullet, which is crazy. So you can really be as precise as this rifle can be. The scope is certainly not a limiting factor. Speaking of factors that you're not limited by is this RPS shooting sight trigger. The original trigger that comes with the M1A is kind of designed to be pulled up into the back with your traditional stocks that the M1A is usually in. But when you put a pistol grip on it, the geometry changes, right? So you're not going to be pulling up into the back. You just want to pull straight back, right? So that's what the shooting sight EBR trigger does, is it changes that geometry, changes the angle to be complementary to the grip. I know before I got this, my finger used to hang off the edge of the original M1A trigger, which over time dug into the pad of my finger and it became uncomfortable over time, which is half the reason I got this trigger. The other reason is because it has a tunable first and second stage, which really lets you get more precise with the rifle because it eliminates, you know, a couple variables of you maybe tweaking if the trigger was just a couple pounds more than what this is now, which is a pretty light hair trigger. Other things I've done for accurizing the rifle is that Sadlac spring guide that's in here. And I forgot to mention, I got it just this week, was the Sadlac National Match piston. That piston, I haven't tested it enough yet. I've only shot 70 rounds with it. But I got a 5-round sub MOA group just yesterday at the range. It was 0.9 inches across, 5 rounds. 4 of 5 were touching the same hole, which is nuts. I'm super accurate. Super excited to get that grouped with the rifle, so I want to go out more and test it and continue to see what we can do with this thing. And then lastly is the ammunition you shoot out of it. My rifle's not too picky, thankfully. I know it changes from M1 to M1, but definitely try and find what your rifle likes to shoot. Mine just prefers M118 LR, or really just Sierra Match King of something around 168, 175. But more recently I've been shooting 175, and that's how I got that group yesterday. And then the last thing I kind of hinted at here, for this section anyways, is the sling. The sling, if you watch my 5-year video, I kind of dogged on slings for a couple minutes, but I've completely changed my attitude on that. I like slings. I've got this on all of my rifles, and it's also on my M14 as well. So it's a quick quick adjust 2-point sling. And what that means is if you're on the bench or if you're walking or you're trying to cinch down whatever shooting position you're in, this quick adjust tab right here, which never gets hung up on anything, and is super stable, this allows you to quickly adjust the tightness of the sling and let it cinch down on your back, and gives you essentially a whole other point of contact, which when you're talking about a heavy rifle like this, that helps with the handling improvements as well, because if you're shooting from a weird position where you really don't have a good spot to put your bipod, you might have to post up on the side of something vertical, and that sling really helps you do that in a more comfortable manner than it would have been without one. So I would certainly recommend getting a sling. I honestly would just recommend getting the Slingster. I've tried a couple other things, but this is the one that works. Okay, so the prompt for this section here is, how has your shooting changed over, the past couple of years? And I think it's mostly due to the scope that I have on it. Not as in it's a limiting factor, just the way I think about shooting has changed a lot. And it's really thanks to the reticle that you see there on the low left. So that's the Tremor 3 reticle that's inside of this scope. Again, it's a Milrad scope. So these graduations here, you've got your mils, of course, your mil hashes everywhere. You're not going to get a complete understanding just staring at this for a quick 30 seconds, but just understand that you can rapidly mill your targets down to the 10th of a mil. You can quickly make your wind calls with these dots that are separate from the mils. It just so happens that for my rifle and my velocity and bullet combination, that these wind dots line up to 4-mile-an-hour wind calls. So when you're trying to shoot into the wind, it makes your adjustments way quicker, way easier. When you couple that with the ability to mill over here on the left side, to mill down to the 10th of a mil for unknown distance shooting, that is a real big a bonus. And then the first focal plane, again, like you don't have to change your math depending on what zoom level you're at. You just zoom in and go. And then lastly, over here, I told you I'd show you this. This is my dope cap. Made this with my laser. It's just a real thin piece of ABS plastic, and I lasered everything away and then filled in what was left with a silver Sharpie, actually. So this is my dope out to 1,000 yards at my elevation, which is sea level. And you can see just a quick adjust for your holds if you forget them. Those are your holds down to the 100th. I think that's down at the 100th place. But yeah, so this has really improved my shooting. The reticle, the dope, and then just the thinking that goes behind it. Okay, so this next section is, how has the rifle held up? What's its durability like and what's its reliability like? So in the first 5 years, I did have 2 parts break. Both of those were Springfield Armory parts. So the extractor over here broke while my friend was shooting it, and actually popped up straight up and then came right back down on the rifle and landed on it. So it was easy to identify what broke. Another thing that broke was the hammer. The hammer had a kind of hairline fracture in the side of it, so it's kind of completely unacceptable. That's a lot of the reason why I went ahead and got the shooting sight RPS trigger as a replacement / upgrade, and I never looked back since. The trigger itself is made out of billet tool steel, so it's a lot stronger than the original trigger that was in there. And again, it's also tunable too, which is something we'll talk about when it comes to accuracy. But yeah, I don't know. It's a pretty reliable gun. I've never had any issues with it. No feeding issues. I've only ever fed it brass cased ammo. I've never tried to shoot steel out of it. That probably wouldn't do too well with the extractor that's in there right now. But no reliability issues so long as you keep it clean just like you would any other gun. As far as durability of it, There's really only been one test for durability other than time. The other durability test has been right after I got the Night Force ATACR. I was proudly displaying this on top of my dresser, as you do when you have new gun parts, and woke up in the morning, started getting ready for work, closed one of my drawers. That shook my dresser, and this fell scope and butt first onto the ground, kind of like this. Um, from about chest height, which is about how high my dresser was. And yeah, the gun survived. It's still here. It, like I said, it landed kind of like this. Um, the ATACR, I haven't had any issues with it holding zero or anything like that. It held up to it. I know Night Force does their own torture test, so I'm happy to see that it passed my torture test too. I did have two parts that bent though. I had the Sage DCSB bolts bend. I don't know how only those bent, but that's all that bent. And then back here, these two tubes for the stock, they bent as well. So I had to take it apart, take out the tubes, and just kind of bend them back by hand, and made sure they were straight. But for long-term durability, reliability, that rifle has certainly stood the test of time. Okay, so now we're going to talk about accuracy and then what parts I think were the biggest improvements to the rifle that I've added to it. So for accuracy, this is the only reference I'm going to make to a cited source in this whole video. In accordance with Army Manual TM 9-1005-223-10, 1.5 MOA or better is the accuracy of the M14 EBR. So these rifles would not have been shipped forward if they exceeded that 1.5 minute of angle requirement, and my rifle meets that requirement. Not that it matters, right? But this has certainly been able to get those groups regularly, as well as getting more accurate groups too. I do get sub MOA groups. I would say every time I go to the range, I get a couple sub MOA groups, but it's not the average accuracy of the rifle. With that being said, 1.5 or better MOA is certainly doable for most of the things I use the rifle for, which is just shooting at targets, paper, or steel. So it works for me. Just be honest with yourself when you're trying to buy one of these or thinking about getting it. Just understand that you're not going to have the accuracy of a bolt action rifle or anything like that. I used to live in a windy place, high desert plains type area. And I thought that the wind would skew my accuracy, so the target stands move with the wind, I move with the wind a little bit, the bullet moves with the wind. I thought that would skew my results. I've since moved to a spot that's at sea level with basically no wind, and the accuracy hasn't gotten any better, and it definitely hasn't gotten any worse. So what that means is, over time, this has been consistently accurate, consistency with the required accuracy that it needs to have, per that Army manual. So 1.5, yeah, that's the gist of it, honestly. It's good. For me, it's good. Parts, accessories, 10 years later. So I kind of foreshadowed this a moment ago. What do I think the most useful parts have been over time? The shooting sight trigger, I think, is probably the first on the list. It lets you tune the trigger to what you want. I've done two different tunings over the years. I had one that was a ridiculous hair trigger that got to the point where it's kind of surprised me too many times that I had to go ahead and change it again to something that was a higher poundage on the trigger. So now I have something that's still like a match grade trigger, but it has a little bit more resistance, a more clearly defined wall from that second to first stage to where that breaks at. But that's a big upgrade, right? Because I can go in there and I can change things whenever I want to. I don't have to buy a whole new trigger set. I just go in, get the old Loctite out, put new Loctite on, and then set it to where I want it to be, and it's good. And then another big upgrade I've made, which is really just the scope rings themselves. So I used to have 1.5-inch Vortex scope rings on here, which just looked ridiculous. And now I found that 1-inch scope rings work pretty well. I think I could probably squeeze out another 8-inch out of this if I wanted to without hitting the rail. But I'm happy with where I'm at now. So again, the recipe for this setup that works for this is going to be that the Nightforce 7-35, the Vortex 1-inch rings with the Sage DCSB. That was one of the biggest ass pains with the M14, is trying to figure out what scope combo, ring combo works to get my scope real low without hitting the rifle. And that's the recipe that works. So I definitely would count that as a big improvement, one of the biggest improvements. And then the last thing is, well, last two things, the sling. We're going to talk about this more here in a couple minutes, but the sling is a big upgrade as far as usability is concerned. Again, it really lets you cinch down on the rifle and spread the weight out over a broader area. Instead of it all being on mostly your forward support arm, the sling helps to distribute that weight across basically your whole back, which makes it easier to use this for extended periods of time. And then lastly, lastly for this bipod here, this is one of the biggest upgrades because it gets rid of about 91 grams worth of weight. So if you're trying to build a replica, if you're trying to build a clone, you want that Knights Armament Corporation sling swivel stud to Picatinny rail adapter. And you're going to put that on the bottom of your EBR chassis, and then up to the bottom of the adapter, what you're going to put is another Harris bipod that plugs into that sling swivel stud. I used to do that as well. But I wasn't going for accuracy. I just thought it was what you had to do. I have since gotten rid of that adapter, and I since went with this Harris bipod that is a direct mount to Picatinny rail, which eliminates some weight. So that's a huge improvement. Would certainly recommend it. And it also lets you get the bipod about 1 inch lower to the ground. So if you're someone who really likes to get as low as you can, that eliminates an inch of height for the entire rifle, which is a big deal. Alright, so what we're going to talk about now is weight, ergonomics, and recoil, which is kind of why I'm standing. So the weight, it's a heavy rifle, it does suck. It depends on your setup, how heavy it's going to be or how light it's going to be. Mine with the scope is a little bit heavier than everyone else's, so you have to deal with that. It does make the recoil pleasant though, so the weight is kind of both a pro and a con. Walking for long periods of time or just having to support this on your own for long periods of time isn't fun. But if you're from a bench or if you're prone, it doesn't really matter. As far as ergonomics are concerned with this rifle, so again, yes, it is heavy, but it does have really good ergonomics to go along with it. This grip here in the back hasn't deteriorated one bit over the 10 years I've had it. The little finger detents in it are pretty nice, and they fit my hand well. The front Kydex handguard here is pretty beefy, but it's beefy in a good way, like it fills the hand, but it's not overdone. And then back here you've got all the adjustability you could want for your cheek riser, as well as a pretty thick, it's like 3/4 inches of rubber back here to absorb recoil. But again, it is kind of a soft shooting rifle, considering it's .308. And on ergonomics, I think the lefty section fits the most in here. So I'm a lefty, and I've never had any issues with like brass hitting me in the face or running the rifle. In fact, I kind of think an M1 is built better for lefties than it is for righties. And the reason I say that is because I don't have to take my shooting hand off of the pistol grip for reloads whatsoever. So if I'm going to do a reload, let me cinch this down here. If I'm going to do a reload, I run the rifle dry, right? Bolt locks to the rear, magazine out, new magazine in, and then send the bolt forward and then get back to work. You'll notice I never had to take my left hand off, which can't be said for righties, because I think they have to do something weird with either reaching over the top or underneath the rifle to charge a new round. So I kind of think the ergonomics are a little bit better for lefties than it is for righties, which is half the reason I shoot a righty M1A, because they do make lefties out there. And then as far as, I guess, kind of accuracy fits into this a little bit, I've shot this out to about 640 yards and it was dead on at that range, and this was shooting in the prone with my sling, which really helped me cinch down on the rifle. And I actually have that clip, so I'll put that clip in here. But yeah, I mostly shoot it at 100 yards, which is sacrilege for the scope that's on it. I know, it's just, I'm kind of limited where I'm at. But out to 640 yards, the farthest this thing has been stretched out to, it's dead on. And I think one of the main ways you can get after that is having the good ergonomics, having the heaviness help you out, and then just sticking to your fundamentals and letting the EBR chassis do its own work. So another question that might come up is, would I recommend this gun to a first-time buyer? And I would say no. It's like the Apple of guns. Once you buy one thing, you have to get into the whole ecosystem. But every gun's kind of like that. Every gun has its quirks and nuances and particular tools you might need to buy to work on it. So if you just know you're going to be an M14 guy, then go ahead and buy it. Just ask yourself before you do that, if you're going to jump, fully into the M14 ecosystem, or if you're going to want to jump around from one gun to one gun, because you will have to buy some M14 specific parts to do any sort of maintenance on the thing. Well, you don't have to. It just makes life a lot easier, to be honest. And I think, what do I want others to know before buying this? It's not as customizable as an EBR. It's not as customizable as a normal AR would be. Normal AR. I'm just going to use it as a comparison. New stuff comes out for the AR all the time, right? There's not nearly as many people making things for the M14, but there are a lot of passionate people out there. And there are offerings everywhere you look. It's just there's not nearly as many aftermarket accessory options for the EBR or for the M1A really as there are for the AR. So just understand there will be a little bit of limits what you can do with customization. And I'll kind of talk about that here towards the end of the video with one parting shot, if you will. But yeah, and then I also have deep pockets. M14 stuff is definitely not cheap. It's very easy to go down the rabbit hole of trying to accurize your rifle. And when you're trying to do that, it asks for a lot of money to get that done. So just understand that if you're going to accurize this thing, it's going to cost you a pretty penny. So have deep pockets. And then on the topic of upgrades and experimentation, what I think has worked best for me, I think, was the muzzle brake, the SEI muzzle brake. I don't know if you can see it over here. I think it's out of frame. The Smith Enterprise muzzle brake is night and day. I did a test. I'm going to talk about this pouch here in a moment. I did a test a couple of years ago on this muzzle brake, and it's night and day. I did it with the original flash hider on here. I shot with the muzzle brake, and I shot with no muzzle device whatsoever. And I remember that this made the recoil just completely tame. So I would certainly recommend this. It doesn't impact accuracy whatsoever, of course, so long as you install it properly. It's definitely a game changer if recoil is something you're concerned about with this rifle. It makes it way more pleasant to shoot. There's a reason I'm laying this down on the table right now. It's because of this. And then the bipod. I already talked to the kind of fiasco with having an adapter on there when I didn't need it. So I think that's another really big improvement I made over time, is getting rid of that adapter and just getting a direct mount bipod. So that kind of falls under the experimentation side of the house with things I've learned over the years. But one of the biggest problems I've had has been with battle belt setup. So if you're a plate carrier type of person, you're not going to really have any issues finding plate carrier stuff, placards for 308 magazines and whatnot. But you will have problems if you're a battle belt kind of guy, because there aren't as many options out there for 308 mag pouches that go onto a battle belt and work well. There's plenty of shingles out there that are for like chest rigs and stuff like that, or the Ferro Concepts like dope pouch, which you can customize with 308 stuff, but that's for a plate carrier. I'm talking about the battle belt. battle belt's more difficult to set up. So I'm just gonna kind of share with you guys some of the experimentation that I've done with setups and hopefully kickstart your experimentation too. So this one I really like. This is the M14 308 pouch. There's no shock cord, there's no flap over the top, which I'm a big fan of. It has enough retention to keep the magazine in there without any of the additional stuff on top. So I'm just a fan of being able to access things quickly, and this M14 pouch is certainly one of those pouches. The reason I like it for the battle belt is because you can mount it pretty low on the battle belt. As you can see, I have tacos right here, which are kind of high. This extra molly up here lets you mount the magazines below the belt line, which I'm a huge fan of because it doesn't get in the way of, if you are wearing a plate carrier too, it doesn't get in the way of that. This one here is what I started with. This is a TYR, Tier Tactical 308 mag pouch. This is essentially a more beefy taco, no pun intended. It's got, I think it's metal reinforcement with some thick leather on top of that, and then some shock cord to go along with it. And this attaches through molly or clips or whatever. I ran this for a really long time, was a really big fan of it, and I just wanted to experiment, so I took it off my battle belt. And that brings us to present day. So what I'm running right now is, this is your Taco version 2 or Gen 2. This is the double decker, so you have a magazine pouch on top of, or a pistol magazine pouch on top of your rifle magazine pouch. What that did for me, at least the way I had my belt set up, was I had 2 individual pistol pouches next to 2 individual rifle pouches. So now I am building vertically instead of horizontally across my battle belt, so it saved me these extra few molly sections right here. I think it saved me 3 or 4. It actually saved me 4 because I'm building out instead of across now on my battle belt. So I like them so far. They work pretty well. Their retention is definitely good. It's got adjustable shock cord. So I just wanted to share with you guys the battle belt problems that I've been having. And if you know any other manufacturers out there that make really good stuff for battle belts specifically, let me know. But again, for plate carriers, you're not going to have an issue finding a setup that works for you. It's just, I'm a big battle belt fan, and those are some of the problems I've ran into. Red 600. Alright, 600. Dude, I haven't even been doing my parallax this whole time. Alright, hang on. Okay, red. Sending. I'm just gonna send it until I'm out. Alright. Okay, so we're getting closer to the end here. We're kind of going to talk about personal connection and the future. So, how's my relationship with the rifle changed? You know, it's pretty serious. It's been like 10 years, going strong. No, like, I still love it just the same. I bought it because I enjoyed using it in Battlefield games and Call of Duty. Like, that's legitimately the reason I got it. I thought it looked cool. So that's why I got it, and I enjoy it. I still love it just as much as I did the day that I bought it and the day that I first shot it. I love tinkering with it. I like working with my hands. I enjoy playing with different parts of the rifle. I enjoy seeing what works, what doesn't, and the maintenance of the thing, because it's different than everything else that's out there, and that really is part of the fun. So I think I'm going to be keeping this basically forever. I don't see myself selling it. If anything, I see myself maybe buying another. I keep experimenting with it. I keep trying to optimize the rifle, trying to accurize it, trying to lighten it. And that, some people can kind of be annoying, you know, trying to just find the easy button for a quick fix. But I kind of enjoy the process a little bit. So I plan on keeping the thing and keep on playing with it. So, thoughts after 10 years. What about the upkeep? What about the complexity? And what about the weight of this gun? So, it's not complex. It's just different. If you have an M1 Garand, a Mini 14, another M1A, maybe even an M1 Carbine, this is similar to it. So, it's in that kind of same ecosystem, the same build. So, it's not confusing. It's just a different operating system compared to other rifles that are more popular. I'm looking at you, AR. So the weight still sucks. It is a heavy gun. Relatively speaking, the way it's built now, it is a heavy gun. But if you have it just in a wood stock, or even if you just have it in the EBR chassis with no bipod, a shorter barrel, and like a EOTech, it's actually pretty light. It's not bad, especially when you consider that a lot of guys today are running their rifles with a whole bunch of stuff on it. Um, if you have a naked M14, it's probably going to weigh the same as someone else with a fully kitted out AR. So that is something to consider. And I think the maintenance on it is kind of half of the fun. Taking the piston out, looking at it, inspecting it, taking the trigger group out every time, and then cleaning the barrel. Like, that's half of the fun of owning a firearm, is just having to take care of the thing. So I really don't see that as a negative. Okay. So the next question here is, what aspects of the M14 have consistently stood the test of time despite the changes in the firearms world, with everything kind of advancing pretty rapidly? It's not going anywhere in my mind. It has a cemented place in popular history. You think of Vietnam movies and videos and pictures, you're probably going to see an M14 in there somewhere. And even in recent history with the GWAT, you have EBRs that are all over the place, seeing their use in combat. Even today, with what's going on in Ukraine, there's thousands of M14s that were shipped out there, and to other nations too. So the rifle's not going away. It's definitely not in mainstream U.S. use, but it's out there. It is still used in the U.S. in limited quantities for EOD, for instance, uses it to basically blow up IEDs from afar. And I'll still meet people around the range today who tell me they remember training on it, or they remember, stories from guys who've used the thing. So it's not going anywhere. I see it sticking around, and mine's not going anywhere either.
Ready?
What color am I looking for?
Orange.
Orange 200.
Yeah.
Orange 200. Sending.
Green 300.
Green 300. Sending.
And yellow 400.
Yellow 400. Sending.
And
That was a miss.
Miss. Alright.
what?
Miss left.
Correcting.
Miss left.
What's the next one?
Blue 500.
Blue 500.
And
Red.
red 600.
Alright, 600. Dude, I haven't even been doing my parallax this whole time. Alright, hang on. Okay, red. Sending. I'm just going to send it until I'm out.
Alright.
So we're going to start wrapping things up here. Before I get to the final comments, I'm going to kind of talk about, for future M14 owners, what advice would I give those people? So I have, first here, you need to ask yourself a question, is what do you want to do with the rifle? Do you want it because it's an M14 and you want the novelty of it? Or do you want it to be a main shooter that you're going to take out to do a specific task? If you want it to be a novelty item, I would say go for it. There's no reason not to have it in your collection if it's just going to be another interesting thing in that collection. But if you're going to use it as your main shooter, you need to consider the fact that to accuratize it, you're going to have to put in some time and work and experimentation into it. And that's going to take money as well. So if you're looking for something that just works right out of the box and has sub-MOA accuracy, this isn't the gun for you realistically. If you want something that's 1.5 or better, then this is certainly the gun for you. Other questions you have to ask yourself are like weight, the cost, buy-in cost for this relative to other rifles that are available today, and just really what you want to do with it in the end. For me personally, I bought it for both reasons. I bought it to be a novelty item because I thought it looked cool, and I bought it because I wanted to shoot it. So I bought it for both reasons. I'm still accurizing it today. I'm still trying to dial in, every little thing that I can on the rifle. So, yeah. Would I consider purchasing another one? Yes. I often go back and forth with considering getting a light EBR build. So this is certainly a heavy EBR build. I've kind of hinted at it earlier in the video. I think it would be fun to get an 18-inch barrel, to put just a dot sight on top of it, and to have nothing else on it, just run it slick. I think that would be cool, and I go back and forth with that. So in the future, I might have another one added to the collection, but that's not going to be in the near term. So for pros and cons of the rifle, the pros are going to be last. We're going to start with the cons. The cons, the accuracy is 1.5 minute of angle. For some people that's good, for some people that's not. I'm one of the people that's okay for. The weight, it's pretty darn heavy. I think this is around the 20-pound build. So you can get a lot more out of other rifles for 20 pounds than you can for this rifle. It is certainly a con. It's also expensive. The triggers aren't cheap, the chassis is certainly not cheap, and the rifle just keeps going up and up, especially if you're going to be buying from someone other than Springfield Armory. Odds are it's going to be a little bit more expensive than they are. The ammo too, the triggers, just all the accessories for it are more expensive than other rifles. Scope mounting options, you're kind of limited with how to mount a scope. You're either going to go the scout route, which just puts even more weight on the front, or you have to go back here. And we've already talked about the 3 mounting points you're limited to. And then there's so many screws. There are about, let's see, I did the math earlier, right around 15 screws. There's 5 that secure the top EBR rail to the main chassis. There's 3 that secure the op rod guide into the chassis. There's a whip screw, whip set screw up here. And I think, quick math, that's what, 5 and 3, and I don't know. It's more than 10 screws. It's annoying. It's a lot of stuff to keep track of. Yeah, that's one of the cons for sure of this rifle. And then pros, accuracy is 1.5 MOA. It looks cool as well. Just yesterday, I had 4 people come up to me on different occasions asking me about it. Like, it's a good way to make range buddies. People see it, they recognize it right away, and it's just fun to have a conversation with someone else who's just as excited about the gun as you are. And it helps remind you, like, oh, this is why I got the thing, because that was the excitement I had when I figured out I could just have this, or buy it, I guess. It's an enjoyable tactile experience as well. It's a different pro. Part of the fun of shooting is just seeing, like, experiencing the gun. Lever guns are fun because you gotta, rack it every time. Pump guns are fun for the same reason. Revolvers, same reason. There's a lot of different buttons to touch. The manual of arms is different on the M14, and that makes it an enjoyable experience because it is unique and it sticks out compared to everything else that's out there today. And then it's a pleasant shooter. Because it's heavy, it tames a lot of the recoil. This right here also helps to tame a lot of that. And it's fun to tinker with too. Although I said there's less accessories available for this rifle than there are like the AR side of the house, there is still a lot to tinker with, a lot to experiment with, and that's one of the reasons I really like it. It's one of the big pros of this rifle. So for the road ahead, and to wrap this video up, I'm going to end with a little bit of a call to action, and then we'll officially close out. But for the M14 community that has the ability to innovate and has the ability to manufacture things, which is certainly not me, I think it would be cool to explore the possibility of making an EBR version 2 chassis. And these are some of the ideas I've come up with just thinking about this for a while, of ways to shave weight and make the thing better. I've got them all written down. I haven't bulletized. But for the EBR chassis itself, since this initially came out in the GWAT, we were putting rails on everything. Everything had a rail system, right? Now we've changed where we only put rails where we need it. So I think something we could do with like an EBR version 2 is make it M-lock. All these lightning cuts in here are great. Basically, you can keep the lightning cuts, add more lightning cuts, and make them all to M-lock spec. That way, we can only put rails where we want them. I would say keep the top rail there, put M-lock everywhere else on the rifle, just to shave weight. Another thing you could do is remove the rear rail back here. This adds just a little bit of weight. It's kind of unnecessary nowadays with the different night vision capabilities we have, because that's what this was originally there for. Things have changed a lot. So it would be dope to see that in a EBR version 2. Another thing is back here on the stock, this is way over engineered. I feel like there's a lot more stronger materials out today, where we could maybe get rid of these tubes and make it just a real thin piece of some super high strength metal. Take a lot of the heft out of back here, and then round over every single edge that's on the EBR chassis. They're already kind of radiused, but not quite. So if you radiused every edge, you'd shave off even more weight. What are some other things here? Why is there a rail that runs the bottom of the rifle? Oh yeah, that's a great question. So, on the EBR, oh that's so tall. On the EBR, there is a rail that runs the entire bottom length here, and it's removable. All these are removable, with the exception to the top rail of the EBR chassis. They're just fastened in with Allen key screws. But there's a rail that you can't see that runs underneath here. So another thing is like, why do we have a rail that runs the entire length? What we could do is, again, get rid of that, put in M-lock everywhere, and only have one little M-lock stud right here for this bipod that I want, or get a direct mount M-lock bipod. The Kydex is hiding it right now, but again, we could remove that entire, it's like a foot length of rail that just adds unnecessary weight and bulk to an already bulky package. Remove sling points. Okay, so you could remove all the sling points on this rifle to include the one I'm using right now. And again, make them M-lock or make them quick detach, because quick detach inherently removes more material, right? So I'm thinking through the lens of how can I make the thing lighter. And then why is the stock bolted on? So make it integral. I don't really know how to tackle this one. I really dislike the screws. I feel like there's someone out there who can probably figure out a way to remove most of the screws to make the kind of M14 EBR more of an integral system. I know that's not the right word, but make everything work together better than it already does. With the ARs, you only have 2 pins that you have to worry about, but here I've got like upwards of 10 screws that I have to worry about, which is just a lot of stuff. So I feel like there's someone out there who can figure out a way to make an EBR version 2, incorporate all those like critiques I have, and then I don't know, just make a different way of securing the top to the bottom of the EBR chassis. This is a long wish list, I know, but like I said at the beginning of the video, I just want to add stuff to the conversation. Moving on from the chassis to the rifle itself, I feel like we could make a M1 chassis or M1 action that completely does away with the rear sight, that has just uninterrupted rail running the top. I know Bullet Defense has done that in the past with a small rail section here and a small rail section here with a split in the middle. But we could, add some material to this rifle and just add a rail across the entire top instead of just 2 small separate stents of rails, if you will, that Bullet Defense has done in the past. So that would be really cool to see, because a lot of us like to scope it anyways. So I'd love to see that as an option out there in the future, is just mill a rail directly into the receiver, which would get away or do away with this entire DCSB, all the Sadlac mounts, all the Fulton Armory mounts. You wouldn't need those anymore. You would save so much weight, bulk, and get rid of all of the variables that the cam screw introduces, all these screws introduce. Like, it's just something that I would really love to see. I'd buy that up in a heartbeat. And yeah, that's kind of it. I guess maybe you could do some upgrades to the gas system. I feel like there might be too many pieces up here. Maybe make everything just one solid piece, but then again, I don't know how it would mount to the rifle. These are just things that I think about at night, as you do, right? You just dream about M14s. Okay, so enough complaining, right? Enough complaining about the EBR, the M14. I'm going to keep the thing. I'm going to continue to try and optimize it, continue to try and find a recipe that works for the accuracy of my rifle, and I'm going to try to accurize handling. Whether or not that means getting a new shorter barrel to save a little bit more weight, I don't know, but we'll see. So look out for a 15-year update. Otherwise, thanks for watching.